Hey everyone, welcome to the Vagabond VC podcast. Today's guest is Meghan Stevenson-Krausz. Based in Lima, Meghan is the director of Inca Ventures, an early stage venture firm focused on investing in fintech startups in the Andean region in South America. Meghan is also a board president at PECAP, which is Peru's venture capital association. Meghan was back in her hometown in Pennsylvania while I was visiting Peru, so we conducted this interview remotely over Zoom. I hope you find Meghan's journey into the venture ecosystem as interesting as I did, along with her insights on the Peruvian startup landscape. So let's jump into the chat. Hey everybody, really excited to have today's guest, Meghan Stevenson-Krausz. She's the director of Inca Ventures here in Lima, Peru. Oddly enough, we've switched places because I'm the one who's in Lima and she's back in America. So we're doing this over Zoom. But Meghan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Seb. It's great to be here. And I'm sorry that we can't be there together to go get a pisco sour or some fries from La Lucha.
Yeah, one day. You know, when I was sitting here actually thinking about how to introduce you onto the show, and obviously you are director of Inca Ventures, but I was having some trouble because that is a very small portion of what you do because you're also with PECAP. I see you also have some personal projects like InclusiveX. With that, you're very involved with the startup and VC ecosystem here, and I wanted to get some information on you, on your background and how you got involved in startups and venture capital.
Not a big question at all. So I'm originally from Philly. As people will probably hear from my accent, I am not Peruvian. However, I've been living in Lima since October 2019, so almost 2 years now. And I originally got into VC and the sort of entrepreneurial ecosystem while living in San Francisco. So I did my undergrad and a master's in the UK. My master's was in human rights. And I moved out to San Francisco to work for a human rights nonprofit there. But I think it's very difficult to be in SF and not sort of get inculcated into the tech ecosystem. And because of my interest in human rights and in equity and opportunity, I started sort of looking around and seeing like who am I not seeing in the room? And I was really struck by the fact that despite being in San Francisco, being in California, where there's a very large Hispanic or Spanish speaking population, I didn't see a lot of people in leadership positions within the startup and venture ecosystem who were Spanish speakers or native Spanish speakers. In fact, at one point, I went to work for a VC fund, and I was the only person aside from the founding managing partner who was Venezuelan. And that was one of the things that attracted me to that fund, who spoke Spanish. So when we would have inbounds from Latin American companies, there's really only myself or him who could answer the questions, unless this founder spoke English, which those who reach Silicon Valley, they tend to, and they need to. But something that I got really sort of, you could say, obsessed with was the idea that people are being overlooked for potential funding, for support, for knowledge exchange simply because of where they're born. And that's something that we could talk about in all sectors and pretty much anywhere in the world. But I sort of said, okay, well, I have a foundation in Spanish. I'm going to improve it. Because maybe if I can meet people where they're at with their language and help make them feel more comfortable, I have this network of people in San Francisco, of other founders, of people working at former startups, now large tech companies, also startups in VC. If I can help be sort of that bridge, then maybe I can help break down some of these barriers. And in that process, long story made short, I met who is now the founding partner of Inca Ventures, where I'm the director, who was born in Peru, in Tacna, not in Lima, grew up in the US, and spent his entire career in the financial sector. And we got talking, and he was like, look, I want to be giving back to Peru. And one of the ways I thought about it was investing in startups in Peru. What do you think? And I was at the time working at a gender equity nonprofit. Or actually, no, at the time, I had just left the VC fund where I was, and I was thinking about next steps. I ended up going to work for a gender equity nonprofit in SF, and also sort of started consulting with him on this project. I thought to myself, if I were a man, what would I do? And I said, I would say yes. So I said yes.
If you were a man, you would frequently be wrong then, because that's all we're getting.
I actually, whenever I have a big decision to make and I'm feeling but I'm not entirely sure if I'm up to it. I have a tendency to ask myself that question. Like, if I were a guy, what would I do?
I've never heard that before.
Well, they say statistically speaking that women will only apply to things or, accept things if they really feel they're like 150% qualified, and men will if they consider themselves to be only 70% qualified. So and that actually we could do better by stretching ourselves. So I consider this my way of stretching myself.
No, that's actually a really interesting way of doing it. It's basically saying, like, if I was only 70%, if I found myself only 70% qualified, would I do it? Right.
Right. Or if I were okay accepting that perhaps I'm not fully qualified, but I believe I can get there. Right. Like, then what would I do? Yeah, that's essentially how I ended up in BC in Peru. Fast forward another year and a half, and the nonprofit where I was working was closing and going under the umbrella of Global Fund for Women to be their home for their young professionals program for philanthropy. And Fernando, our partner of Inca, said, "Hey, do you want to come do this full time and move to Peru?" And I was also dating a Peruvian, still am. And so, the opportunity to not be long distance and live in a Spanish speaking country, I had as a goal becoming fluent in Spanish, and to be able to contribute to a nascent and growing ecosystem was really exciting.
So Inca Ventures, do you operate off an investment thesis? And if so, what is the actual investment focus? And kind of a follow-on question to that, how does your background in human rights and gender equity and focusing on, let's just call it like underrepresented people, how does that tie into your investment focus?
We do. Our thesis is revolves around Fintech and the Andean region. Depending on who you ask, the Andean region may mean a lot of things. For us, like, we're focused on Peru and Colombia, and we're open to, let's say, like Bolivia, Ecuador, and other countries in the Andean region. We have made one investment in a Venezuelan company, although that company, importantly, is domiciled in the US. They went through Y Combinator. And I always add that caveat because people are like, Venezuela, what? So, and especially other investors. And we also have a focus on looking for underrepresented founders. So, I mentioned that Fernando actually was born in Tacna. We are constantly looking for investment opportunities that are outside of the typical, most startups are concentrated in the capital cities of their countries. Anecdotally, I have noticed that in, let's say, like 95% of the founders that we interact with all come from like one school. And so we're really looking to, and something that I've worked very hard on, is building relationships with incubators, because Peru happens to have incubators in every single university in the country. And that's something that the government has really pushed. And so we've been building relationships with those incubators so that we can keep tabs on, what are the companies coming out of them, so we can do office hours, so that we can, I've done mentorship sessions, I've done webinars on like, what are investors looking for. I was shocked when one such program told me that I was the first investor that they were talking to. And actually this program was in Arequipa, and Arequipa has an incredible, if not the best, computer programming department in the country, in Peru. They have numerous programmers that come out of that program and get jobs in Microsoft, Google, et cetera. And there are quite a few people, and they're very proud Arequipeños. You'll meet them in Lima. I'm sure you may have come across a few of them in your since you've been in Lima. And they'll tell you they are, and there are many in the tech ecosystem. And so the fact that there was not that kind of network in the same way that I think you and I might be used to in the States was really shocking to me, and is something that, through our work, whether it be through our investing or through just the other work that we need to do, because we're a fund investing in a growing ecosystem. Investing in the ecosystem also invests in our pipeline and then invests in our portfolio, right? So
that's really interesting that you have a region in Peru that they're basically developing some of the best pieces of like programming minds in the country. And yet no one is coming out of Lima, which has a concentration of talent and also capital. And for at least in Peru, that has like the actual venture capital activity. No one is looking there where they're bringing all this talent to teach them these entrepreneurial skills, to give them these networking opportunities. Why do you think that gap exists? that they're not actually going, if these programmers are coming from there, shouldn't they be going to the source? Shouldn't these venture capitalists be going to the source, to where the talent is?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things to unpack there, right? One, something that is not to be undervalued is the centralization of Lima, is the case in Peru, but be it the capital city or the big cities in any of these places, right? In the sense that, and I've heard this over and over again, well, if they have ambition, then they'll come to Lima. So why do we need to go to them? They'll come to us. I think that can be problematic in a couple of ways, but that's just, I think we have to recognize that there's a mindset there. Two, it's whether or not, I gave the example of the fact that some of the best programmers are coming out of Arequipa. It doesn't necessarily mean that those people are wanting to start businesses. So we can't assume that. And the reason why I mention that is because socioeconomic mobility is really important, right? And people look at it in different ways. Now, something that I've been really impressed by in general in Peru is that I think there's a very entrepreneurial mindset. And that's, again, actually, that's across Latin America. And so even though, I might, from my American mindset, if I'm looking for stability or socioeconomic mobility, I'm thinking, okay, I go get a job at a big corporation, and then I get a paycheck, and then, I build myself stability. I've actually noticed that may be the calculation for some people. It also is not necessarily the calculation. So I think we also have to take that in mind, right? Of people know as a programmer, you can get a higher salary. And particularly if you're going to these big companies, we have seen actually an investment that we made. Actually, our first investment in Peru was in a company called Chasqui. They are a last mile logistics startup. And Gonzalo Vegaso, the founder of Chasqui, is from Arequipa, very proud Arequipeño. He was at Google previously, left Google, and started his own startup. So I think we will see more of this talent. Now, I actually am not sure if Gonzalo is a programmer. You should have him on the show and ask him. But regardless, in terms of the talent that's coming out of Arequipa as a place that is not Lima and does have great universities, and there's plenty across the country, right? Just because the top 2, 3 technically are in Lima does not mean that there's not good education elsewhere.
Yeah, no, the point is well taken, even if not a programmer. And, I was actually going to ask you if there was a company that you wanted to highlight in your portfolio, but you just did. And I actually love that example, especially because I've been here and I just left Cusco, where we talked about Inca history. We talked about Chasquis, which were the runners.
Yep. That's where it comes from.
Yeah, right. So I really love that name for last mile delivery. So beyond Inca Ventures, you're also involved pretty heavily here with PECAP, which I actually, like I had mentioned to you, I spoke to Luis Noro, who was also a member there.
Our former executive director.
Yes, up until literally like yesterday. I'd love to hear more about, what you do with PECAP and how the organization works here in the ecosystem.
Absolutely. So currently I am serving as the president of the board of PECAP. And for those who don't know, it is the Peru Venture Capital and Seed Association. So we're one of 5 or 6 associations in the region. Our goal is to promote venture capital in the ecosystem and investment in Peru. And it's my second year serving on the board. I got pretty involved from the beginning because, as you might have guessed from my background, ecosystem building is just like one of my things. And as I mentioned, from our perspective as a fund, it's also really important that we're giving back and helping to build the community and the ecosystem here, because it will only serve to benefit us in terms of our pipeline and our portfolio building. At PECAP, our biggest event of the year is our flagship event is the Peru Venture Capital Conference. The last 2 years, it has been virtual. We're hoping that it may be in person again next year. But in it, we showcase all of the top startups coming out of Peru, tech talent, funds, but not just Peru. We really try to have it be a regional event with, of course, a highlight on Peru, because that is our goal, is to show that Peru is this burgeoning ecosystem with startups that are competing with the best startups across the region, and that one can have impact and profit by investing in Peru and in Peruvian startups and in Peruvian funds, for that matter.
Actually, speaking of those events, when I was speaking with Luis, he mentioned that I asked him about some of the challenges that startups face when building a company here. And he mentioned that, I guess it was a survey or a poll that was taken during these events, where the response is typically access to capital. Do you agree with that? Because from what I've actually had with conversations here, it seems like There actually is capital here. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
It is a question with multiple levels to answer.
Typically is.
Yes. Generally speaking, yes, I agree with him. We have a very close-knit and strong community here of investors, all of whom play a key role. And the COFIDE, the Development Bank of Peru, is launching, or technically just launched, the fund of funds to invest in venture capital funds that are investing in Peru. They also have programs like Startup Peru, which unfortunately, because of the pandemic, has been put on hold, but we're hoping that they'll restart that, which gives grants, 3 different sizes of grants to startups in the country. And they also have a focus on getting outside of Lima to the provinces. And they also have been, I mentioned that there are incubators in every single university. That was an initiative by the government to promote entrepreneurship, innovation. And so they have been funding those programs. What we're starting to see, and actually, if Luis didn't already, I can send you our most recent report on the state of venture capital in Peru, is an increase in interest, not only interest, but actually investment from external funds. And that is extremely exciting for us. And most of it's happening at the seed stage, which also we see as being a really positive step, because previously, if you were a Peruvian startup and you were only in Peru, most likely a fund from even Mexico, actually, like funds across the region, including in the US and Mexico, Brazil, et cetera, like they're not going to be looking at a Peruvian startup until they are scaling to that market. So the fact that they're starting to invest at seed stage is incredible. That said, we have noticed this year a decrease in appetite from local angels. We've seen angel investors from outside of Peru starting to invest in Peru. Again, really positive. The thing is, if we cannot continue to promote and support a healthy level of funding, at the very least at the pre-seed and seed stages at home in Peru, then we won't have those startups for international funding and money investors to want to invest in or be able to invest in. So I do believe, and to put this in like concrete forms, let's say that generally speaking, a seed round in Peru, or like a healthy seed round to get to the milestones necessary to raise a Series A, is generally between $500,000 and $1 million. And really in Peru, you can do a lot with $500,000. And again, this part is somewhat anecdotal, but what I've seen is that the majority of seed rounds end up capping out at around 300,000. You're really lucky if you can get to 500. The only companies that we've really seen been able to raise $1 million or more are the few Peruvian founders that have gone to YC. And then they have to raise a bridge round because they're not actually able to achieve their goals to get to Series A. That's important again, because, and it's due to the fact that the checks that exist currently within our market they're small. We generally write a check of around $100,000. We could go up to $200,000, but our sweet spot is really around $100,000. Angel Ventures writes checks of $50,000. We frequently co-invest with them. Winnipeg Capital, about $30,000. I'm not entirely sure about the check size of Salk and Thai, but they actually tend to enter more in Series A. So right there, if you have like us and Angel Ventures and Winnipeg investing, that's still only about $180,000. So you need more angels, you need more participation, and we need those external, those foreign investors coming in. So we think that the funds is incredibly important step, and hopefully will continue to help us grow the amount of funding that we have within the ecosystem. But we also feel as an association that it's crucial that we continue funding the incubators, accelerators, the earlier stages, and helping support the angel networks, so that we continue to have a vibrant angel community that's investing in these startups.
You mentioned a few venture firms that you yourself being one and co-investing with others. You mentioned the fund of fund and these incubators, which would be, public money that would be supporting these startups. It sounds like there's a gap though in the private angel investors, like the individual investors. So are there any other initiatives or plans or strategies to help get more, I guess, like high net worth individuals involved in the startup ecosystem? Do you think it's just they don't understand VC? Or
I think there's a couple things going on. one is that we can't ignore the fact that there is, and I can't comment too much on this as a foreigner, but there is currently the political situation has deterred many of our traditional angel investors.
And for context, Peru just went through a pretty contentious election and, have had some political issues here in the recent years. So,
yeah, I happen to not think that the political context is going to impact the innovation ecosystem. I think we can look at Argentina and see that, in fact, innovation technology, it thrives in uncertainty.
Really good example.
It's actually an opportunity. Yeah, it's actually a great opportunity for founders who are ready to disrupt the status quo. So I happen to not think that that's going to be an issue for our ecosystem as long as we can continue having investors with the appetite. And so I'd say hey, now's a great time to invest in Peruvian startups. The other thing I think that goes on is a lack of understanding around the risk that's involved in investing in startups. And that's where the angel networks come in. A lot of them do do educational content. In fact, actually PECAP right now is partnering with COFIDE and with Swiss Contact, which is an initiative of the Swiss government here in Peru, to run a course on sort of like investment preparedness, but for the angel investor. And we're doing that with EFINO, which is a group based in Switzerland that has done this all over the world, including in many emerging markets in Lebanon, and I believe also on the African continent. And actually the woman who's running it, I was a little bit skeptical at first, I'll admit. I was going, a Swiss company is going to tell us how to do this and teach our angel investors. Not that they don't have great best practices, but just kind of that one size fits all doesn't work kind of mindset. But she's actually Colombian, one of the women who's leading it. And she's very focused on, we got to really understand and do a diagnostic on what is the ecosystem currently, what's its stage and what do we need? And so I'm very excited to see the results of that.
You said that is soon to be launched, or that's something that's already happening?
It's ongoing. It's currently we're in the evaluation stage, okay, and then it will be running.
Yeah, no, that's a great initiative. Okay, so as we get towards the end here, one of the questions I've been asking individuals is, where do you personally see the startup and venture capital ecosystem kind of heading in the next 5 years? Where do you see Peru and some of the hot sectors?
That's a great question. One, I think, and I'm not looking into any crystal ball here, but knowing that Kriana just raised a record-breaking round, we will be seeing a lot more edtech. So I think, edtech is certainly on the horizon. Also, there's a lot going on now around crowdfunding, around fintech. Will the government have a fintech law or not? Evaluating what's going on in Mexico, or what has happened in Mexico with their fintech law. So we're eager to see. I can't, make any kind of pronouncements about the next 5 years, but certainly we are finally starting to see startups that are trying to challenge the hegemony that many of the banks have had in the Peruvian banking sector. That will be very exciting to see. And something else that I think we're only just starting to see the beginning of is that actually the second most invested, or the sector that received the second most investment in the first half of this year, was the food tech sector. Now, you have been, spending the last 2 months in Peru. You know what an incredible food scene it is. Peru has been leading in gastronomy for decades now. It is actually one of those things that I have been waiting. I'm just going, where are all the biotech startups? Where are all the food tech startups? Where, this is just a sector where I am convinced that Peru has to lead the way. And so I'm really excited to see where that goes.
Yeah, I learned that you have several thousand different types of potatoes here.
Mm-hmm. So, I know the best potatoes you'll ever have.
Yeah, sadly, I've only gotten through half of them. So no.
Only half?
No, I know.
Wow, doing pretty good.
No. On that note, my last question for you before we sign off here, like you mentioned, I have been eating a lot. I fully admit that. Where should I go get dinner tonight?
Ooh, where can you get in? I would suggest that if you have not yet, go to Isolina in Barranco.
Oh, Isolina, I've heard of it. Yes, okay. I haven't been.
I mean, that's where Virgilio and he eats there, So if you can't go to Central, go to where the chefs eat.
Yeah.
You also could see if Central has reservations.
Okay. All right. Great. So if investors or anyone interested in Peru want to reach out to you, what would be a good way for them to reach you?
Absolutely. Feel free to find me on LinkedIn. It's that sort of standard, linkedin.com/in/Meghan, and my name has an H -SK.
I'll add the actual link.
Yes.
Yeah.
I make that easy because my last name is difficult to spell. But yeah, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I do ask that people include some kind of note as to why they're looking to connect. But most investors do. It's more of a, please founders, happy to talk. Please tell me why you think we should have a conversation.
You hear that, founders? Always add a note. Hey, I did.
Yes, you did.
Okay.
And here we are.
Yeah, here we are. Thank you so much for taking your time out today, speaking about Peru's ecosystem. I'm looking forward to potentially one day having a piece go with you, like you mentioned. And
likewise.
Yeah, until next time, everyone.